everybody? Welcome back to Bitcoin is Hard. Today's guest is Isaiah Douglas, certified financial planner. Bitcoin and financial planning, that's kind of two funny things that go together, Isaiah. So tell us about that. How are you merging both those worlds?
Yeah, I think, we see things similarly, which we'll unpack and get into, but when you try to solve for thinking about how do you help make sure that the outcome for someone's goals with their life happen, right? Like at the end of the day, our role is to say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, or, Mr. or Miss Client, what is it that you're trying to solve? And then let's put things in place that allow that to happen. So utilizing Bitcoin is massively important in that conversation, in my opinion, because of a lot of the kind of macro elements of what's going on in the world. And the simplest way to think about Bitcoin is it makes life easier. When you can save into good money, it allows the money to go further so you can do more or quit working or getting to what we call work optional sooner. So trying to understand and get people to kind of quantify and understand that Bitcoin, less of an investment. And I think that's where everyone takes Bitcoin initially. And that's where I was a long time ago to this is a savings technology that allows you to take money that you work really hard for when you're spending time away from your family and hobbies and things that maybe you'd prefer doing, even if you love your job, right? You can save it and store it somewhere. So I use the analogy a lot of times of a battery. If you're trying to charge a battery, but it's always draining, really hard to kind of finish the job that you're maybe doing outside. If you plug in that battery and it charges really fast, it makes it a lot easier. When you save into US dollars, you are having a battery that's always leaking. When you save into Bitcoin, you have a battery that's staying fully charged. That's the way that I look at it. And that's the way we've kind of bridged the gap and start having those conversations.
What tangibly needs to happen or will happen? What are the second, third order effects of Bitcoin becoming more and more central to people's finances? Because if I'm meeting with you and I'm like the client and I'm thinking about 30 years from now when I retire, or wanting to make work optional for myself, 15 years from now when I'm 45, when I envision 15 years from now, like I envision a society where Bitcoin is the money, or I'm able, at least optionally in my own life, and able to use it as money. And I don't hear enough conversations around the like tangible strategies around how to get to that point.
Yeah, and I don't know if I have the perfect answer on how to make that happen, but if you wanted to live on Bitcoin, you could do it today. I think the tax laws in this country would have to change to really allow it to work well, to where you don't have to think of it as capital gains when you wanted to spend it or use it. I think if we saw a change there, you would see massive changes where I would be the first one to tell you I would live 100% on Bitcoin the exact next day if they allowed that to happen. And I would love to be able to pay our employees. I mean, trust me, I talk to our team all the time. And something, I think there's one team member, she's newer, that doesn't own Bitcoin, but everyone else does, right? Like I've tried to have that conversation with all of them to say, hey, I want you to save in this so that it allows you to do whatever you want, whether that's stay here and work. And I hope you want to work with us for a long time, but shoot, I just want to see you successful. But as far as being able to tangibly look and utilize Bitcoin today and into the future, the way that I've looked at it is a savings, again, savings technology, the same way that if you think about traditional investing, you're going to, let's say Apple stock, right? I'm going to save my money into Apple stock. And then when I need it, I'm going to sell it, convert it back into dollars and use it to spend. That's the way I kind of explain to people today. It is definitely not a stock. And it's always important to kind of like arrange that. But people are like, well, how can I pay with Bitcoin? I'm like, well, there are ways to do it, and there are more applications coming out that you can pay with Bitcoin. And I want to actually get into some of that later on with talking about BTC Pay Server. But today, with the way things are listed, it does feel more like an investment and less like a currency or medium of exchange because of just the way that we have it structured, which is unfortunate. And I think that will change in 15 years. I really do. Now, maybe that's just us, pie in the sky, being hopeful, but I think that does happen as enough people start to adopt it. I will tell you, like today, from our perspective, from a personal family, 7% of what we make every month is DCA'd and saved automatically into Bitcoin for long-term savings. Like that is what we do. I converted my entire, well, almost, I would say 99% of the Roth IRA I had into Bitcoin in early 2020. So that's worked out well. But for me, that was something that I saw as this makes sense. And if I have an asset that I believe is going to continue to grow, how can I take that and then make it into something that is going to be tax-free in the future? And to me, that made a ton of sense to align owning some of that Bitcoin, and it is self-custodied. So for those that are wondering, you can do that. I think that's super important. You don't have to trust a third party. You can hold your own keys. So that's awesome. And then we bought a house in July. I did not sell any Bitcoin for that, but I did use a little bit of a collateralized loan to help make that happen. And I've used a collateralized loan for business capital injections into our own business. So to give you an idea, like that's the way that I've tried to live on Bitcoin at the moment. I think another really cool thing that I wish I would have known about sooner, and for those that are listening that maybe like this, the idea of using Strike and Bit Refill is like mind blowing. And if you know what I'm talking about, you're smiling. If you don't, you're probably like, what the heck is this? So, what you can do is you can use Strike and take dollars and pay via Lightning on Bit Refill for, um, gift cards. So, case in point, in Indiana, which is where I'm from, I can go and use Strike and buy a Kroger gift card to go get our groceries and get 6% back. When I get that cash back, I can convert it instantly into Bitcoin. So I get 6% back on my Bitcoin instantly. I think the Fold card is another awesome example of being able to live on that and have less dollars. So part of my paycheck goes directly into Fold, and I run as many bills as I can through there. Again, get sats back. Lolly is another awesome example. If you're going to travel, so for me with work travel, if I'm going to book it, use Lolly, book the travel, earn Bitcoin back. There's tons of ways to start to live and think about seeing those rewards. I will give you a really tangible example with Fold. So when we bought this house, we had to put in a radon system in the basement. So the soil in Indiana it's terrible, right? It was like smoking, I think they said 25 packs of cigarettes a day if you spent time in the basement, which is unfinished. So it's like bad. My wife's like, we're not moving in there until this gets solved. So we go and we pay, and I think it was $1,070 for that. I got super fortunate. For those that use Fold, you feel like your spends, sometimes you don't get good rewards. I got the 10% back. So I got $100 back. I was like pumped. Text my wife and she was like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. But what was really neat is that was over the summer, right? And what has Bitcoin's price done since then? That $100 has turned into $180. That is really powerful. So how much longer before that radon system's already paid for? And when you start doing that, I know Matt Odell was on a podcast talking about when he bought golf clubs or something. And it was like, yeah, they're already free. Like, that's pretty cool. And so the more people see that, they're going to be like, shoot, why do I want this other thing? And when you start to see CPI prints at 6.2% or 5%, and people are starting to wonder and say, I didn't get a 5 or 6% raise. And I ask people that all the time. Like, what is money? What are you trying to do? And I think the idea to think through why Bitcoin fits and why people are starting to adopt it, it's really just right in front of you. When you can say, hey, we're going to print or create, $3.5 trillion and cost you zero, eyebrows go up. People are going to say, what the hell is going on here? And I think Bitcoin fits nicely in a narrative that you can say, I can save into something that's going to treat me well. And when I go bust my hump and work, my efforts are going to be secured in something that you can no longer take. And my purchasing power is etched here and it will not change. And that's really, really powerful.
One of my optimistic views of the future is how everyone leaning into these Bitcoin tools right now and continuing to use them, and Bitcoiners becoming more and more creative of the financial services that are available within the current framework is just going to continue to put more and more kind of pressure on the system to have to change.
I mean, if something doesn't change and we stay in the status quo, and you and I are both fairly plugged into Bitcoin Twitter, which to me, I've learned as much about money and economics on Twitter, which is wild. And my wife is always like, you waste so much time. I'm like, I've learned a ton. But yes, I do waste time on Twitter. I know that. Um, if they don't, like, people are going to just continue to do a Michael Saylor approach and say, if I can borrow at next to nothing and inflation is higher than what I can fix that debt at, they're just going to arbitrage that. And like, there literally is no way that that's going to be sustainable longer term. People are going to just arb that until it just is breaking to everyone else. So you either have to say, you know what, we're going to open this up so everyone can use it and make it easy. And then I think, and I would go back to the idea of, Bitcoin is not centralized in a few parties, right? Like, it gets so dispersed because people are going to want to live and they're going to want to spend it. And I think there's a lot of ways, if the tax law changes, you're going to see Bitcoin be so widely distributed. It's not going to be something where people are like, oh, all they want to do is hold it and there's no spending of it. I don't think that's true at all.
I agree. I think that taking cheap fiat loans and then pouring it into Bitcoin, like, there's an end to that. There's no way that like fully continues. And so that's why I'm trying to leave an open mind to like, what could Bitcoin financial services look like when more and more people are on the Bitcoin standard. I think it should be a very real personal finance conversation that people are prepared for, knowing how to live in a system if that happens.
Yeah, and again, where I talk to a lot of people about, and not everyone can have the conversation that we're having, especially early on if they don't understand Bitcoin yet. It's a bridge too far. And so for me, a lot of times it's just getting them to understand Bitcoin is a savings tool. Bitcoin makes life cheaper. Hey, let's look at if you timed it awful and you dollar cost average, what's your compound annual growth rate? It's like, that's really impressive. If you had the worst timing luck in the world, and like stuff like that to just help give examples, which again, just to kind of CYA, since I am a financial advisor, right? Like past performance is not going to guarantee future results, but look at the network effects and the adoption that's happening. And you start to unlock all these things and you look at it across the world. A stat that I give a lot: 12 million millionaires in the United States. If all 21 million Bitcoin were available, that's 1.75 Bitcoin per person. That scarcity is wild when you think about it, because it's A, it's global, and B, just think about how many people have way more than 1.75 Bitcoin. So the idea of just getting a little bit and it goes a long way. That's what I try to tell people. You don't need to have massive amounts of Bitcoin for it to have a dramatic impact. So if someone's listening to this and you're like, oh, I'll never get to one or anything, that's fine. Just start to save. And I think that helps accrue wealth over time to where you can afford some of the things that are there. So that's the other kind of thought on it. But yes, my viewpoint and what I love, because we work with a lot of small business owners, it's like, shoot, when you are spending money with a small business today, you're swiping your card. No one's using cash, especially if they're younger. I don't have cash on me. I don't carry cash. So what are those fees that you're always having to pay? And what would happen? Think about this. To give back to small business, if we were able to say, you know what, those credit card fees, let's just get rid of them. Like your margins are now so much higher. Like that's incredible. The coffee shop that you love, that you don't want to see have to be open, part-time, or, cutting staff, or they just can't keep up. What if they were all of a sudden able to have, 3.5% back in their pocket for every cup of coffee? What does that do to their revenue over time?
And that's just another feather in the cap, I believe, of the Bitcoin payment processors are here today. So if they're here in 2021 and like financial planners and regular small business owners are asking the questions today of how to get rid of, credit card fees, I just think that trend is going to continue to accelerate. And then on the customer side, the reason why accepting business as a small business can still make sense is there's two categories of people that you can find. Well, three categories. Three categories of people that would like spend Bitcoin, because a lot of people, they may push back on the idea of spending Bitcoin. Why would you spend Bitcoin when you could spend your weaker dollars? Two sides you have to look at that from. If the business is demanding Bitcoin, then you don't have a choice. If the product is only available for Bitcoin, then you don't have a choice. If you want the product, you have to figure itself out. Or maybe they're offering a discount, or maybe they're, giving some other incentive for you to pay like that. Or you have people that, just do it because they love it and they want to see like Bitcoin circulate. But there's three ways that you can still spend Bitcoin. He talked about Strike app. So Strike app lets you spend fiat and the business receives Bitcoin. So you're still saving all that credit card margin for the business while not triggering a taxable event for yourself. And you're still able to retain all your Bitcoin savings yourself. Number two, something we've talked about a lot is the idea of Roth IRAs. Like you can hold Bitcoin in a Roth IRA, which eliminates the taxes on it. And as more and more people get ramped up on self-directed IRAs and more ramped up on Bitcoin self-custody and in-kind distributions once they reach retirement age, one of my plot twists in my brain is that actually retirees are going to be among the first participants of a widely used circular economy inside America. Because as you retire and you're on fixed income, you're going to need sound money more than ever. Like if you don't have any new money coming in or very reduced money coming in because you're retired, you need some money that protects its purchasing power more and more. And so I think actually having small businesses being prepared to capture this retiree spending, I think is a story that's going to get told more and more. And then number three is you do have Bitcoiners that may be traveling in from a different country that have different taxation laws, and they all have Bitcoin wallets. Like what's amazing about OpenNode and BTC Pay Server and any wallet, and this is the genius of Bitcoin in general, it's an open network. It's an open network. So I don't need Cash App to pay Cash App or Venmo to pay Venmo, and I don't need a certain kind of ID to get a Venmo account to pay your Venmo checkout or your PayPal checkout, Bitcoin is Bitcoin. And so you as a business are now open up to receiving Bitcoin from any kind of wallet, any sort of person that lives under any sort of jurisdiction. So just because in the US we have this funny, issue of like where it's treated as property doesn't mean that's happening everywhere, and those lines are going to continue to get like more and more blurry.
Absolutely. And I think one of the amazing things that again I credit in consumption of like Bitcoin content, kind of Jack Mallers and Strike talking about Bitcoin the asset and Bitcoin, the rails, right? And I think so many businesses, even if they just want dollars, just use the rails. And that is such a huge lift in revenue. And that idea with Open Note of saying how much you want to hold in dollars or Bitcoin, because I've heard in El Salvador, right, like the McDonald's or Starbucks, they're not holding and retaining that Bitcoin. I think they may question that moving forward at some point. And when does that switch? And that will be obviously massive news.
My thoughts are evolving on the business kind of converting it back to fiat. It's not my favorite. However, people are smart. Like people are smart, and I'm pro human and I'm pro people figuring it out for themselves. People will figure out their fiat to Bitcoin split, period. Like any business will figure out their fiat to Bitcoin split. And so I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm okay just separating both those conversations and talking about the payment processor and just really drilling in on this undercuts fees. Like it undercuts fees and opens you up to this broader network. And then the conversation of the like people are going to choose what asset like to hold.
Well, it's something we've talked about, right? What's your unit of account? And when you start to look at Bitcoin as a unit of account, there is something that happens where the blinder falls off and you can't unsee it. And you're like, wow, why would I ever go back to something else? And if I can make this work in this way to hold and spend and live on Bitcoin, why would I change that? And there is no good answer. And I get, and I just had there's a really terrible article. I'm not even going to mention who wrote it. And I had a rebuttal on Twitter just yesterday. And what you get back is, well, I would want a currency that is not so volatile, not pushing back on any of the things that were put out there. And I think that's the hard thing as times as a Bitcoin. And I've seen that is like, it's 10x harder to refute the BS and the narratives that are just wrong and that are lazy and that haven't put in the work versus just being able to trot out things that have been beaten to death and solved and said, hey, there's actually a solution here. But yeah, people are going to figure it out. People want to hold better money, and capital will go to where it's treated best. At the end of the day, if you think the US dollar is going to be better than Bitcoin, good luck.
When you have that full conversation and the client decides to allocate to Bitcoin, how can you talk about how you help them get allocated, and can you talk to them like how if they're asking you, hey, how much should I be allocated? How do you tackle that?
Yeah, this is always the tricky question, and the quick, probably the correct answer is going to be it depends, right? But then I'll give you an answer that I think people can take away something with. So first and foremost, one thing I heard early on when I started talking about Bitcoin is that it's only for young people. The first client that actually bought Bitcoin, I have a great relationship with him, 69 years old. Why did he buy it? For his daughters, was already in a good place, and it was the 1 or 2% allocation. Guess what? That 1 to 2% allocation is significantly larger today than it was when he initially bought it. Now, for us, it was look at this as additional money to make sure he sets up his daughters to be set. That was it. That was the goal there with that allocation. For others, for most clients, and a lot of our clients are typically younger clients. So we typically are like 45 and under is probably the ideal kind of target range of who we work with from a firm perspective. So like my niche is really vet, med, and dental. So you think about that clinician, owner, operator. We also work with a lot of people in tech. But the way that I look at it is, okay, what's the allocation that we want? What percentage? What makes sense? What do we feel comfortable with? And from an asset allocation, and for the hardcore Bitcoiners, they're going to say, hey, asset allocation, it's 100% Bitcoin or maybe 50% Bitcoin and 50% Sats. I get that, right? And not everyone's there, and you have to start somewhere to get someone comfortable to get exposure. And I think as someone gets comfortable, their amount of Bitcoin that they're going to own goes up. And then let them make that decision, because our role, candidly, is to help give advice and guidance that's right for that person. Let them, it's their money, make the decision. So after that, if they get more comfortable and we can talk about the risk associated, we'll go there. But I had, case in point, had a client that started 5 to 10% allocation to Bitcoin. He now has a home miner, has, like he's gone way farther than I have personally, just because he has a little bit more time. So you will get people that will start to see it and really get it, that want to adopt it full on, using a cold card, like all that, right? Like he's all in. And there's others that it is initial allocation. So I always try to tell people, do a lump sum of the amount that we want, because you're going to kick yourself for not buying more, but that's okay. And if it needs to be in chunks, that's fine. You're always going to wish, fast forward 5 years, you're going to wish you bought more. That's always how it's been. You can look at the records of, oh, Bitcoin's expensive, I should have bought more, and it was $30, right? They missed the boat. Then to me, it's dollar cost averaging, saving into it. Just say, I'm going to carve off this portion of the new money coming in. What's the best use of the next dollar? And okay, we're going to go here, we're going to go here. Hey, let's include Bitcoin in that. What can we do to automate to where we're just consistently saving? Because again, if you were the worst market timer, but you consistently dollar cost averaged daily, right? Compounding in hindsight, 48%. Now, again, that's worst case scenario. Best case scenario is, north of 100. So let's understand that that's still really, really powerful from a financial planning perspective. And it's hard to model that correctly in a lot of financial planning tools, right? Like, I think that's an awesome opportunity for someone out there that wants to develop that. But from a financial planning perspective, it's just saving and better money, increasing purchasing power to allow someone to then go from there. So it's lump sum, figure out what the right lump sum is, and then just continue to save from there. And that's genuinely been my suggestion and kind of the thesis around it, which is start small, but you need to have some ownership, because then they're going to start looking at the price, and they're going to start reading an article, and then they're going to start doing this, and then they're going to ask questions because so and so told them that Bitcoin's a scam and it's a Ponzi, and I get the text, right? And I will tell you, there was clients that bought. I talked to them at sub 15, didn't buy until 55. Then you see the correction down to 30, held all the way through. Had bought a whole Bitcoin at like 50, 55. I told him, like, hey, you've earned, I know you're not up as much as you would have liked, and he kicked himself for not buying earlier, but understood why he owns it. So again, make sure that the idea of having a long time horizon and not looking at this with, hey, I'm here for number go up or get rich quick scheme. Like, that's not what it is. And that's what I tell everyone. I get that you can make a lot. That is not the reason you want this. There's plenty of other great things for it, but yes, it can make life cheaper.
I have this last question, and then we'll do closing thoughts. What Bitcoin financial service do you think does not exist yet that you'd love to see, or is there anything that clients are asking for, or a question, a gap that you've identified from conversations with them of something that they are trying to do with their Bitcoin that just isn't quite there yet?
I think the mortgage piece is interesting. I know a lot of people have talked about that. So again, as someone that bought a home this year, it's always weird. Like, do you tell them you have Bitcoin? Do you not? Because they're not going to tell. So I kind of just hinted at it, and they're like, "Yeah, we're not going to. That's not part of what we would look at." I was like, okay, that's fine. It's cool. I think that would be an interesting play. I think the idea of life insurance paid out in Bitcoin is another interesting one, because when I think about, hey, this life insurance, this term policy that I have on myself is worth $1 million. I have $1 million term policy on myself. Well, shoot, what's $1 million going to buy, my kids in the future? Not a lot, right? So it'd be great to be able to see completely backed life insurance with Bitcoin paid out.
So that one happened in my own brain, where I'm pretty sure it was Mass Mutual, right?
Yep, $100 million. Yep, it was tiny, tiny amount.
I really did call them, or I tried to email in, and I was like, I just have a small. It's $100 a year, so whatever that gets me. I was like, why am I sending $100 a year to Mass Mutual for them to buy Bitcoin? Why don't I just buy Bitcoin with my $100 then? As far as and so I don't know if that's fully responsible, but that question does, again, the fact that question is here. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that to me makes the most sense, because how can you then ensure your family is protected? Because I mean, if I'm an insurer, that to me seems like an awesome arbitrage opportunity. If I can go buy Bitcoin, hold it, and then I can collateralize it, borrow against it, do all this other stuff, pay out insurance claims in dollars, that's devaluing. That's a great business. Why wouldn't they want to continue to do that? Like, no, people need to demand, I want my life insurance payout in Bitcoin. You're not paying me in dollars. I don't want that.
Well, yeah. So anything I didn't hit, and tell us where we can find out more about you and where people can get in touch.
Yeah, so I am a co-owner of Vincere Wealth Management. So you can go to vincerewealth.com. That's where we're at. Again, we're very open to conversations around Bitcoin and the dreaded word, I will say it, crypto. There are more folks on my team that are much more open. I am one that says, hey, I think Bitcoin's a story to focus on. It's great if you've made a lot of money in other spaces. I've never argued that you can't. I would just say own more Bitcoin because that's going to be the unit of account that you want. You can find me at ID Financial on Twitter. That's where I share a lot of my unfiltered thoughts. If you're a veterinarian, you're probably not listening to this, but I do have a podcast that's focused on those folks. I've talked about Bitcoin on there, and I will tell you, it's amazing to see people having questions when I talk about Bitcoin in that space when no one else is talking about it. And they're like, tell me more about this Bitcoin thing. So yeah, Vincere Wealth, ID Financial on Twitter. Those are probably the two easiest places. Let me know what questions you have. Happy to help in any way that I can.
Loved meeting you at the CoinDesk panel. Thank you so much for coming on Bitcoin is Hard, and we'll talk to you more soon.
Hey all, this is Brian. You can reach me on Twitter at Brain Harrington. Shoot me a DM with any feedback from today's episode. This has been a Choice App production. Bitcoin is becoming centric to personal finance, and we want to help you learn how to better engage with Bitcoin financial services. None of this is financial advice and is for education and entertainment only.